Salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who were lost. This is the gospel of our Lord.
Well, good morning, Hope Grimes. How is everybody? Yes, it's a full house. I'm so excited because that means that everybody is coming back to church. We're going to start to maybe get into some normality, some better schedules, right? I don't know if everybody else, summer is so exciting and it's so much fun. And then you realize you get a couple weeks into it and you're like, we have no schedule and everybody's just going wild here because we love schedules. And so it's going to be a couple weeks. We're all probably going to be triggered for a little bit, but I'm so excited to see so many of your faces. As I know some of you have been traveling, we've been gone, we took a family vacation. But again, I'm so excited that you are here to worship with us. It is an incredible word that I have for you today as we are continuing in our year-long sermon series of Jesus for Real. As a church, we are journeying through the four Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And today we get to step into a new sermon series called Life-Changing Conversations as we begin to wrap up the Gospel of Luke. And I want to point out a couple things about the Gospel of Luke, because as we've been digging into the Gospels, I can imagine you have noticed this as well. They each have unique characteristics as they give us these accounts of who Jesus is, what his life was like here on earth. And so Luke is unique in the fact that Luke gives us so many moments to be able to pay attention to. And these moments show up because and are accounted for because it's where Jesus stops. It's where Jesus sees people. Jesus begins to notice people that the world just throws aside. The world says, hey, you don't matter. And Jesus shows up and he says, you do matter. He doesn't want anyone to feel like they have been overlooked or just stepped over as if they do not exist. And so as Jesus is continuing to make his way toward Jerusalem, Luke gives us this very accurate, this very clear account of all of Jesus' steps and his stops along the way. And so as we wrap up the Gospel of Luke, these final chapters, I hope, even in a season of busyness, a season of chaos, that we allow ourselves to slow down and really look at the words of these scripture passages, to pay attention to these stops, to pay attention to the encounters that people have with Jesus, to pay attention to the conversations that Jesus is having. How does Jesus respond to people? How does Jesus enter into conversations with other human beings? What does that look like for him? What does that look like for you and I as his followers over 2,000 years later? And those people, there's a diverse variety of people that Jesus comes into contact with because remember, he came for all people. And what we see in Luke's account is that Jesus is engaging with people who are hurting, with people who feel lost, with people who feel broken beyond repair, as if there is no hope for them. People for much of their life, if not all of their life, that have been overlooked. Even the people we find throughout the Gospels, they don't even know how desperate they need to have this encounter with Jesus Christ. And so as we dig into this, my hope and my prayer is that we slowly look at these words found in Luke's gospel. And I also want to point you to the fact, something interesting, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but I want to remind us of this. Luke does such an incredible job because Luke himself is a Gentile. He's a Gentile writer that is writing to a primarily Gentile audience. And what that means is these would be people who would have found themselves on the outside of the Jewish community. So what they knew about who God is, who God says they are, we don't know all of those things, but they would have found themselves on the outside. And why that's so important is the ways in which Luke brings some of these stories to his gospel. It's important for us to see the real Jesus as we're learning about who the real Jesus is. Right, the Jesus that shows up, The Jesus that sees people and doesn't just see them, doesn't just take a glance at them and say, I love you, but he sees you for exactly who you are, your identity as a child of God. Not your past, not your reputation, not what everybody else says about you, but your true identity as a child of God. And we are reminded just how much we matter. No matter, church, how lost you feel, no matter how broken you might feel as you walk in here today or just in this storm of chaos, it's exactly why Jesus came. Jesus came to seek and to save those who are lost. And at some point in our life, each and every single one of us has been lost. We have been searching. We have been seeking for something. And Jesus is here to find us, to seek us. And so as we step into these life-changing conversations, these encounters that Jesus has with people, I want us to think about life-changing conversations that we have had in our own lives. A way that your life has been transformed. Maybe someone stepped into your life. It was a parent, a coach, a teacher, a spouse, a mentor, a pastor. And that person said just the right thing at the right moment. Maybe it was someone who saw something in you that you did not even see in yourself. Maybe someone told you the truth in love. Not exactly what you wanted to hear in that moment, not exactly what you thought you needed to hear, but it was the truth and it was spoken in love. They reminded you of exactly who you are and whose you are. And maybe there was someone who just showed up and they just sat with you. They were just present with you. Who does that remind us of? It's Jesus. It's the way that God is using his children to still speak his truth and his love into this world. And so as I think about these life-changing conversations that I have had in my own life, because I've had a lot of conversations, right? If you look back over your life, there have been a lot of conversations that you have engaged in. And not every single conversation that you find yourself engaging in is a life-changing conversation. But we do have conversations that change the trajectory, that someone has spoke something to help us along our journey. And so one of the conversations that came to mind, especially as I looked at our gospel passage for today, was a conversation that I had years back with Pastor Pat Quaid. And if you don't know Pastor Pat, he is a pastor over at our West Des Moines campus. This is a picture of some of our youth and family team. While we were both over at the Waukee campus, I was the children's ministry director over there for about 6 years. And he was the campus pastor as we launched Hope Waukee. And I will tell you, it was one of those conversations that I will never forget. And it was also one of the most frustrating conversations that I have ever had in my journey. Because I was in a wilderness season. I was frustrated. I was trying to figure out the next step. And if you know anything about me, you know I'm the least patient person you will ever encounter. Seriously, I am always like, what's the next thing? Where are we going next? How can I get this done? Done is my favorite word. I love that. But when you are in a wilderness season, God is teaching you how to be very, very patient and to trust in him and to trust that his plans are perfect and they are good for you. And guess what else? They're on his time, not yours. So no matter how much I kicked and I screamed and I was like, I'm going to do it my way, God was like, you're going to do it my way. Because you know who I am, and you know that I have created you to do something absolutely incredible. But Whitney, you need to be patient during this time. And so Pat and I gathered and we had this conversation, and I can remember telling him, I don't know what I'm searching for, I don't know what I'm seeking, but I don't think it's here. Right? I don't feel like I belong here. I think I need to step outside of the church. I don't think there's a place for me here. So before I got into ministry, I'm a classically trained musician. And so I would sing in opera houses and other places. I spent time in Austria getting to sing in places where Mozart composed and Mozart performed. It's really beautiful, but doors started to close. And so there was a real frustration with that. God, why have you given me all these gifts and abilities and I don't know how to use them anymore? God, I don't know where you are. I don't even know if you know that I'm still here asking you for help. And as I told Pat, I don't think I belong here anymore. I don't think I have a seat at this table, I'll never forget what he said to me, because it was absolutely God speaking in and through him. He said, Whitney, I don't want you to miss out on all that God has in store for you here. And in that moment, I wish I could tell you, I was like, oh, that was exactly what I needed. It was refreshing. I was so frustrated. I was like, Pat, you have to say that. You're a pastor. You have to be positive in this moment, right? But now I look back, it was years ago, and I'm like, he could not have been more right. And I share this story with you because I can imagine there's other people out there. You're trying to figure out, what is the next step? What do I do next? And it's not just young people, it's also people who step into retirement or new seasons of life. Be patient. Continue to seek God. Even when you feel like God isn't seeking you, he absolutely is. Be patient. And as we continue these life-changing conversations, these encounters that people have in these final chapters of Luke's gospel, that's what I hope we discover. We look at these stories and we can be able to see ourselves in these stories and the ways that Jesus wraps us up, the way that Jesus reminds us of who we are. And so today, as we look to Luke's gospel, we are starting in the 19th chapter. And for anybody who has grown up in the church, you know this story, right? You learned it in Sunday school, and maybe you didn't grow up in the church. That's okay. You joined us for VBS this summer, and you might be familiar with this man, or your kids might be familiar with this man whose name is Zacchaeus, right? What do you know about him? Well, Zacchaeus, he was a wee little man. A wee little man was he, right? He climbed up in the sycamore tree, the Lord he wanted to see, right? You remember that Sunday school song? We taught it to some of our younger kiddos this year, but that's what we know about Zacchaeus in this very familiar story. But as we look at his story, I hope that there's some surprises along the way. Because again, it's interesting how we come to these stories and we're like, we think that we know this person, and then God absolutely illuminates these incredible things about who they are and who it is that he has called them to be. And so if you've got your Bible or you have a Bible app, I invite you to open to Luke chapter 19, and we're going to look at verses 1 through 10. And so we start out right here as Jesus is entering Jericho. He made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and he climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. So quickly we learn about this man named Zacchaeus as Jesus again is on his way toward Jerusalem. The Passover will be happening soon. Jesus is going to make his way toward the cross. But we encounter this man named Zacchaeus. And if Scripture tells us the name of this man, it's really important to pay attention because there's going to be some kind of encounter. There's going to be something that happens here with Jesus. And so what do we really know about Zacchaeus, right? As I mentioned, this story is only told in Luke's gospel. Zacchaeus is not found anywhere else in the biblical narrative. He is not found anywhere in the Old Testament or anywhere else in the New Testament. Now we hear about tax collectors in Matthew's gospel and in Mark's gospel. We talked about a tax collector last week, but nowhere do we hear about Zacchaeus other than in these 10 chapters. And if you have read this story, you might be like me and you have more questions than you do answers about who Zacchaeus is. It's almost like I want a full pedigree of him. Like, what is his background? How did he become a tax collector? Who is his family? What did he go on and do after this? We don't get any of this. What we have is this story, this encounter that Zacchaeus has with Jesus. And so let's look at what we know about who Zacchaeus is. So Zacchaeus is the chief tax collector in the region, and he's very rich, which that makes sense, right? He would be rich. What do we know about tax collectors? They're really wealthy. They like to fill their own pockets. They like to take more than they need. So they're despised. They're rejected. They find themselves on the outsides because here they are Jews who have traded their people to work for Rome. And it's kind of a very icky and an unethical way that they go about their work. But the only place that we see chief tax collector mentioned is in this story. When you go back to the original Greek, it is only mentioned right here. So not only are tax collectors seen as the worst of the worst of the worst people, Zacchaeus is times all of that, right? He's despised, he's rejected, he's lonely, he's not welcome in social circles. He's probably not welcome anywhere near anyone in this town of Jericho based on his occupation. He probably also has people who work for him, but as far as friends, as far as community, he probably does not have much community around him. But there's also something else that is unique to Zacchaeus. He wants to see Jesus. We hear the scriptures tell us that right away. But there's one problem. He faces some barriers, some obstacles along the way, but that doesn't stop him. He's really curious because he wants to see Jesus, so he finds himself climbing up a sycamore fig tree. And why that's a little ironic is someone of Zacchaeus' power, wealth, status, you would never climb a tree. That is foolish. That is childlike. You would not find yourself climbing a tree to see Jesus. But Zacchaeus is so desperate at this point to have an encounter with Jesus, the Messiah, the one who is coming through the town, the one who has a crowd all around him. And Zacchaeus knows that he would not be welcome in that crowd. He didn't want to cause a ruckus, so he finds another way to be able to have an encounter with Jesus. But as I look at Zacchaeus, and I look at what we know about him, why? Why is Zacchaeus wanting to see Jesus? What is it that he's searching for? What is it that he's seeking? Because right off the bat, Zacchaeus looks like he's got it all, man. He is living the good life. He has power. He has status. He has wealth. Why are you so desperate to see Jesus? So desperate that you're willing to climb up in a tree. So, church, I want to ask you here this morning, what is it that you're searching for? What are you seeking? What is it that you're longing for? The thing that will somehow satisfy your soul, right? Life would just be good if I had this. I'm not going to name them all on here, but a few of them, we think about that. I mean, just take a moment. Jericho, modern day United States. We like to say that the Bible isn't that relevant anymore. How could it be any more relevant? Pride, status, power, those things were all so important. Guess what? They're all still pretty important as we are living here right now. It's really important to have good status, right? It's really important to be in control and to have power, right? We look at people and we're like, gosh, they've got it all. So what is it that you're searching for? If you just had a little bit more money, your life would be so much better. Maybe if it was just the next thing, right? Like if I just get out of this season and I move on into this new season, like I'm going to be satisfied. I'm going to be fulfilled because everything is going to work out as it should. I'm going to be living the life that I've always been called to live. I wish that was true, but we're still the same person. What about if it's success or approval? Where are you going to seek approval and to seek worth? Are you going to everywhere else, to other people, to find your value, to find your worth? Maybe it's just an escape as we step into this fall season where it already, for many of us, feels probably a little bit chaotic, and you just find yourself saying, I just need an escape. Like, I just need to step outside of all of this, and then I'm going to be okay, right? If I just go on a vacation for a little bit, if I just go to a tropical island somewhere else, then I will come back, and I'm going to be like, I'm going to take myself. I'm going to be a new woman. No, I'm not. That's the biggest lie that we tell ourselves, right? I was just on vacation and I found myself saying that as I came back. I'm like, I just need an escape because there's all these to-do lists. There's all these tasks. Everybody needs something from me. The reality is, no matter how far we go away, we're still the same person. We might come back. We might be refreshed for a moment, but it's like all of those things, they keep coming at you. And so as you look at this list, and maybe your word isn't up here, and maybe you're not for sure exactly what it is that you're searching for, but I want you to think for a moment, if there's just one thing, if I could have one thing, just this one, what would it be? And then I'd be okay. I'd be satisfied. My life would be fulfilling. Because it's ironic that we hear about this story, that Luke records this story about Zacchaeus. And I find it ironic that we are searching and we're seeking and we're going so many places for all the different things that our soul is longing for, and we're missing what it really is that we actually need, God. And so I do a lot of work and studies and thinking a little bit about community and loneliness, especially as a youth and family minister. Because, church, I'm not for sure if you're aware of this, but Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they're the most connected generation, especially Gen Z, that we have seen. They have never known a world without AI and all of these things at their fingertips. But here's the reality. We're more connected than ever. We can FaceTime people whenever we want. We can play video games. My kids play video games with people, and they talk to their friends on there. You can even put them on the big screen, and you can talk to them. And those are all really great. But we're also super lonely. We live in isolation. We get in these silos. We tell ourselves the lies that we can do it on our own, that we don't need anybody else to come alongside of us. Like, what do you mean? If I need to have a community of people to come alongside of us, then I must be weak. I must be doing something wrong. And you couldn't be more incorrect in that. And so I pulled this study from Pew Research just to kind of give us a little bit of idea of what's going on in our culture still here today. So this is from 2023, but this is surveying different adults, different ages, different education, and a few other factors in there. But 54%, it's not a bad number, 54% of adults feel close to people in their local community. Like they have a community of people around them that they could reach out to. It's not terrible, but the number that I think about in my mind is that means that there are 46% of adults here in the United States who are lonely, who are isolated, who don't feel like they have a community, people that they can go to when they need something or they need to be reminded of who they are. So why is it that Luke records this story about Zacchaeus? Right? We're searching, we're seeking, we're looking for all these things. And Zacchaeus, he's a really rich, he's the chief tax collector. He has it all. He has everything that his money could buy. He has everything that the world could offer him. And yet, it's not enough. It's not enough to satisfy his soul. So here he is, climbed up in this sycamore fig tree to have an encounter with Jesus because he is so desperate to have connection, to have an encounter, to be seen, to be known, to be loved, not by what everybody else says about him, but just to be seen for who he is, not his occupation, but as Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was seeking Jesus, but the surprise to Zacchaeus is God has been seeking him all along. And so when Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and he called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. And I want to stop there because this is a really powerful piece of scripture. That as Jesus is walking by, he is moving, going towards Jerusalem. There's other things that Jesus has been doing, but he looks up, right? He has a crowd around him. There are people everywhere. Think about being in a crowd. I'm sure many of you were at the Iowa State Fair, right? You're bumping elbows. You don't even know whose arm you're touching. There's people everywhere. But here Jesus is. We see Jesus doing this time and time again. He notices somebody that needs to be seen. he looks up and he sees Zacchaeus. And he doesn't say, hey, you up there in the tree, what are you doing? Get down, right? Like, calls him by name, Zacchaeus. Not, hey, tax collector, what are you doing? Not, hey, you notorious sinner, get out of the tree, I'm walking by. But Zacchaeus, quick, with urgency, I want you to come down from that tree because I must be a guest in your house. Not, hey, I'll send you a text later. I know Jesus didn't have a cell phone, but, right? But not later, not maybe next week, let's try to get together and no plans are made, but must. Like right now, there's an urgency. I want to be a guest in your house today. And as Jesus dines with people, that's a sign of friendship. Jesus wants to get to know Zacchaeus, not who everyone else says Zacchaeus is, but he wants to sit with Zacchaeus, to dine with him, to have a conversation with him. And Zacchaeus is not reluctant to this invitation. He quickly climbs down, and he took Jesus to his house in great joy and excitement. And even before Zacchaeus had ever had a conversation with Jesus, he was full of joy. He was full of excitement. And I can imagine a man who has found himself isolated, right, on the outskirts of town, the joy. Someone has seen me as Zacchaeus. Not, oh, great, there's that guy. Why is he here? What's he doing? What wrong is he going to do today? But Zacchaeus, come. I want to have dinner with you. But the reality is not everybody was excited about that, right? There were other people who thought to themselves in this crowd, right? Well, Jesus, what are you doing? Like, why don't you want to have dinner with me? We've been with you for so long. We're traveling. We came just to see you. But Jesus has this trend of dining with notorious sinners and tax collectors and people who the world would say, why would Jesus want to spend time with them? And so they grumbled, just like God's people grumbled in the wilderness. But what Jesus is pointing to is he's reminding each and every one of us that we're all sinners. Each and every single one of us are sinners in need of God's amazing grace. I want to have a chance to get to know this man, not based on what you think about him, but I want to get to know him, and I want to remind him of exactly who he is and the life that he is called to live. And so as Zacchaeus and Jesus are together, Zacchaeus tells him, I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. Excuse me. Now, anybody who is in taxes or deals with money, I'm sure you know, like when you've made a mistake. I'm sure Zacchaeus is well aware that he has taken more than he should have, that he has stolen from people and people who do not have much. But this is what he's telling you. There's a change. There's a heart posture. There's something that has changed about Zacchaeus because of this radical encounter with Jesus. And so Jesus responds to him by saying to him, salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. Excuse me, sorry, it's a little dry up here. But so it's interesting when we read this passage of Scripture. Sometimes we can get a little lost and think, well, what's really going on here? But like I mentioned just a second ago, something transformed, something changed in Zacchaeus. It's like the light bulb went off, or the elevator finally went all the way up to the top floor, where it was like, this is the life. I have been missing out. This is what I have been searching for. This is what I have been seeking, right? This is why I wanted to see Jesus with my own eyes, to have this encounter with him, because he's reminding me of this abundant and this beautiful, fruitful life that I have been called to live. It's not the life that I have been living. I don't want to be that person, because that's not who I am called to be. And so as Jesus talks about salvation, I think it's really important for us to understand that Zacchaeus doesn't earn his salvation. He doesn't earn his salvation. Think about the encounter, where it started, where Jesus found him. He didn't yell up and say, hey, you Zacchaeus, you terrible, awful, horrible man. When you start to fix your life, when you get it all together, maybe then we can have dinner. Maybe then you'll be good enough for me. Jesus didn't call out to him and say, hey, Zacchaeus, when you prove yourself, when you go out and you stop the practices, when you finally give enough money back, then, maybe then, Zacchaeus, I might love you. It's not what Jesus does at all. Jesus shows up and meets people right where they are. He met Zacchaeus. He called him down from that tree so he could have an encounter with him, so he could meet him right where he was. No matter what kind of shame or darkness that he was carrying with him, Jesus reminded him of exactly who he was, and he started with grace. So Zacchaeus doesn't earn his salvation. His generosity is the fruit of God's amazing grace. He has finally realized, this is the life that I have been called to live. It's exactly what Luke's gospel reminds us of. It's what Jesus reminds us of, why it is that he came. Because he came to seek and to save those who are lost, to find them, to remind them of their true identity as a child of God, not to continue in their ways. Jesus doesn't ignore the sin. He doesn't say it doesn't matter, but he starts with grace and he reminds you of the power of who he is and who you are, that you have this rich and abundant life that you get to live right here, right now. And that's true for each and every one of us in this room. Jesus is constantly seeking and knocking and reminding us of that truth. And so as we look at this friendly and familiar story of Zacchaeus, it's not just a story about a wee little man who climbs up the sycamore fig tree. This story is revealing the very heart, the very character of God the Father. A God who sees you. A God who is constantly seeking you. A God who is showing up and kicking down walls, all the barricades, all the obstacles that everybody else wants to put in place, all the ways that people want to say, you can't sit with us, you don't have a seat at this table. God comes in and he says, yes, you do. Because you are mine. You are a beloved child of God, created on purpose for a purpose. As a church, if there is anybody who has ever told you you don't have a seat at the table, you do, because God says that you do. He crosses boundaries for you. There isn't anything. He sent his son into this world for you so that you can stand before a righteous and holy God. So that you can go out and you can live an abundant, rich life, so that you won't be empty anymore. This beautiful, fruitful life that you have to live. And I want you to know that you absolutely belong here. I don't know if maybe you were walking in this morning and you were wondering, should we go back? We've been gone all summer long. Do you think they're going to be okay? You think they're going to question us because we weren't here? No. Why do we know when you're not here? Because we miss you. Because you belong here, because you're a part of this family. That's why we notice you, because we love you. We want to check in. We want to make sure you're okay. Is there anything that you need? But again, you belong here. And I can imagine there might be some empty seats or people that you're wondering, where are they? Well, God's calling us to go out and to remind them too that they belong here. They have a seat at this table. And so as we step into Rally Weekend this next week, I want to encourage you to think about what this season looks like for you. Not what is it that I want to do, but what is it that God is calling you to step into next? One of the things that we know about Christianity, we talk a lot about here as a church, is Christianity is a growing experience. We are growing each and every single day into the likeness of Jesus Christ. We never graduate. And there's a real beauty in that, the way that we continue to blossom. And so what is it that God is calling you to do this next season? Is he calling you to take a class, to dig in and to get to know who he is and who you are a little bit better? Is he calling you to serve somewhere? Is he calling you to step out of your comfort zone and finally join Encore for coffee dates, to be in community with people? Maybe there's a student in your life who is longing for connection. Join one of our youth and family opportunities, Power Life, Ignition, Hope Kids. There's so many different ways to get plugged in this church. A few more things I want you to think about as you journey this week. And I want you to ask yourself these questions every single day this week. You can take a picture, or maybe you just have a really good memory. That's okay. And it'll be online later too, so you can look there. But what I want you to think about is, what do you need to hear from Jesus today? And I want you to ask yourself that question every single day, because it might look a little different every day. What do you need to hear from Jesus today? Not what does everybody else need to hear? I was reminded of that this week. I was reminded, Whitney, what is it that you need right now? Not what does everybody else need in this moment. What do you need? Ask Jesus, tell Jesus what it is that you need. No matter how ridiculous you think it is, ask him for what you need. And then my second question for you is, who is Jesus inviting you to see? I want you to think back about some of your conversations that you have had with people recently. What do those conversations sound like? What do they look like? Have you had a conversation with someone lately who says, I just don't think this church thing is for me. I don't really think I fit in. I don't think I belong. I've been told before that I don't belong. Maybe Jesus is inviting you to invite that person to come and to see and to allow the power of the gospel to radically transform that person's life. And not just their life, but to transform the lives of people around them, to transform this community. God has that kind of power. It's just a simple invitation to come and to see of God's goodness and his glory. So I want you to think about those things this week. We're going to stand and we're going to worship and we are going to sing. Go ahead and stand.